Good morning. And what a beautiful morning it is in New York City today. For me, I've just completed my 25 rounds of radiation, and I've got a rest before doing 3 more of a different type. I decided my hair's growing back. It's been about 3-4 months since my last chemo. And it is growing back, and I'm not going to wear hats or any covering when I'm in my own home. So I felt this is me. This is me after suffering a bout with endometrial cancer. It's also me totally ecstatic because I believe I've beat it. So it'll be confirmed, but so far everything is really positive. So I look forward to what my new hairdo is going to be. And I also have some tips for everyone if you're like me. I don't believe anything is taboo anymore. We can speak. I can go out in public just like this if it wasn't 20 degrees out, and nobody would scoff at me. That wasn't the case when I was a 16-year-old girl with dermatomyositis and I entered college with a wig. I was teased and ridiculed constantly. This was 1960. So even though we think we haven't come a long way, we actually have. So I also wanted to say, if you've got a problem, and you will with your gut and with hemorrhoids, this came to my aid. Kirkland's baby wipes with just vitamin E. That's it. No other additives. Totally gentle for when you want to feel relief and you don't want to add paper. And you may not be able to afford Kohler or Japan's Toto, which uses a totally different sanitary system of water and hot air. I know, I experienced it in a magnificent hotel in London, the Dorchester chain, Park 45. They had that in 2015. Now, on to politics. It's only politics as usual because the Cold War with Russia never ended. Never. We were deluding ourselves to think that it ended. Certainly didn't end in 2014 when Trump said to Putin, and also on the record, that he would recognize Crimea as a Russian territory. He was hoping to build there, just like he built hotels and casinos in Ukraine, just like he hoped to do in Moscow. Has he been a friend of Putin's for 35 years? Absolutely. Has the Republican Party, except for a few, gone over to being Russian sympathizers and at this point, I think, traitors to America? I can't stress it strongly enough. I was sick when I read the Mueller Report, and that's why when I read it, I wrote about it. Nobody bought my book, Shining a Light on the Mueller Report. It's a synopsis, just yet like you have Cliff Notes. But it's an accurate synopsis of Russia's hacking into the Democratic and the Republican Party, hacking into secretaries of state, and also converting some of the registration forms so that maybe the last letter or a number was altered in 2 counties in Florida. They did it then, and I don't know any candidate who has ever blatantly accepted foreign help to help them win an election, who gave them polling data, who was complicit with the GRU. Russian sympathizers today in the GOP, whether it's on the state or federal level or the local level, they're not patriots to me. A patriot stands up for our democracy. A patriot doesn't want to see the Western democracies destroyed. A patriot does not allow disinformation on COVID, on climate, on anything. A patriot cares more for the people of these United States than they care for their own self-interest. And I hope they suffer. I really do, for their connections with Russia. Putin is an oligarch. The Republican Party has been paid by oligarchs. And let's face it, there are a couple there in the Democratic Party who are also into self-interest with oil and other interest groups. So they don't vote either in the interests of we the people. Let's never forget. Just like we don't forget what happens to genocide of African Americans, or the Holocaust, or the Armenians, or any group in this country, we cannot forget that people are marginalized and that every life is valued. And when you think more about the ruble and gold, rather than thinking about your country and what Putin has done to create disinformation on so many fronts, think again. You're not a patriot. I remember when Republicans used to carry around the Constitution with them so that they could cite the laws when they cared about we the people. But they've forgotten. And because they've forgotten, they're rewriting history. We can't forget what happened with the insurrection of the 6th of January. We can't forget that Russia supports the far right. And they support it in all of Europe. And they are destabilizing nations all over the world. Putin would rather do that than boost his own economy. You realize we don't even know how many people have died from COVID in Russia. We have very little information coming out of Russia, but what we do have now is astounding. 7,000 people have been jailed for protesting this war. A lot of the Russian soldiers who are in Ukraine in tanks were given enough fuel and food for 2 days. 2 days for this massive campaign, and they weren't even told that they were going to war. These poor kids who are 18, 19, and 20-year-olds thought that they were going to be welcomed by the Ukrainians with open arms and looked upon as heroes. That's Putin's disinformation machine. If he believed it, he was wrong, and he's corrected it by becoming a rogue despot. What else can you call him? He's a terrorist. He uses cluster bombs on civilian populations. He is bombing the Ukraine from Russia, as well as from the Black Sea, and wherever he can position his missiles. This is not a war to take over a country who wishes to be taken over. They don't. And the Russian soldiers are either being captured or they are literally leaving their tanks and going home. You've heard about the diaspora of 1 million people out of Ukraine. Well, it's true. We have no idea how many Jewish people are involved or how many people who are just ordinary Ukrainians. The Jewish population is decentralized, but approximately 250,000. Doesn't matter. Jewish agencies are providing relief for all refugees. There are refugees leaving from Russia as well. They don't want to stay in their country anymore. And one of my friends asked me, what can you do? How do you negotiate with Putin? Well, I think that what Zelensky is doing is correct. He needs humanitarian aid. He needs to be able to get food to his people. I believe he's gotten some missiles from the West, not from us, but he's gotten them. But I think there's other things that we can do. The Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world. It produces 1/3 of all the wheat, barley, and other grains. And China is a key importer. If China would get involved on behalf of all the people who want him, Xi Jinping, to be involved, he could end the war like that, because otherwise he is going ahead with his pledge to supply monies to Putin. On the other hand, we're already helping Putin. We haven't totally cut out all Russian oil supplies, but there are ways to get to Putin. I used to think that when Rex Tillerson was Secretary of State, the only one more powerful than Trump as president was Tillerson, because he was head of ExxonMobil. And ExxonMobil has a huge presence in Russia. It's a consortium, that's true. But you know what? I might think it's a good idea to short all their stocks. Everyone knows that there's collusion on oil prices and gas prices. All you have to do is go to a gas station in any place in the United States. You look at all the corners where the gas stations are, and what are they, a penny apart? That means they must have talked to each other, and they know what the set price is going to be. Well, I remember when 9/11 happened, and that was a real tragedy for us. And I remember going up to my country home at the time and being invited to a party with hedge fund owners. And they said to me, as soon as the market reopens, we're shorting all the stock. And I was heartbroken because I said, how could you do that when the country is suffering? How could you do that now? They didn't have any qualms about it then. So why should anyone have qualms about it now? If we keep oil and gas prices high, that's funding Putin's war. We depress the price of gas. He doesn't have any money left. He's got 2 bankrupt economies and a war effort that costs a hell of a lot of money. And it won't take then 2 or 3 more weeks of cluster bombs and holding nuclear power plants hostage and threatening who knows what. There's already a price on Putin's head. So I don't think if you're a part of the GOP that supports him, you're putting your money in the right spot. It's not going to be popular. And another thing that I think is really important. What's happening today is a good thing for the rest of the world, because I hope Western democracies will realize for once and for all that we've all been manipulated, and it is time for us to collaborate. We got other problems that we really got to solve. We still haven't conquered COVID, and I've heard such nonsense that this is Chinese lab related. There is zero evidence. And we don't even know how many poor Russians have died from COVID. The numbers aren't out there. But I do know one thing about Putin. If you spread disinformation in his country, and disinformation to Putin is really whatever he has not sanctioned, you can be in jail for 15 years. I'm not saying that we should do the same thing here, but I think certainly we should be getting disinformation off of our social media platforms and cable like Fox, or any channel that has disinformation, misinformation, and perpetuates violence. Let's read about the things that move our world forward. We could also have Biden go into the Defense Production Act. And as Bill McKibben said, we can build heat pumps and give it to the Europeans. We can give them insulation, and we can do so much more. We can give it to our own country as well and make alternative energy on a war footing. Took us a year or two to get into World War II, but we were prepared. We really have another crisis. What's happening with our climate is actually surpassing what insurers can pay out. The damage to people and property is awesome, and we're going to have food shortages and insufficiencies. We really should be on a war footing to save our planet and save our nation, so that we can also once again be the breadbasket also for the world, and also be proud of our innovation and our research and development. I'm for American entrepreneurship. I'm not for being complicit with somebody who I think is a despot and a terrorist and a little unhinged. Can't have power at any price, not at the expense of all of us. So remember and never forget, Putin is not our friend. He's not a friend to Ukraine. He's not a friend to Poland. And he's not a friend to Russia or any other country that he's quote unquote befriended. Look at the devastation that happened in Syria. Never forget. And don't vote for these people who support the Russian government for the money they can make out of it. They're traitors. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week, hopefully with more tips and more of what I think is really important. And again, I think I'm going to spice up what's happening with stories from what was and what were corporations when I was growing up in America in the 70s and the 80s, and how we had capitalism at most of the places that I worked for. Well, I guess every place that I worked for. Capitalism with a heart. God bless you, and thank you for listening. Bye now.